Again, for the record, this is Marcus McCaskin, the hearing officer. The time is 7:13. Let's go ahead and open the public hearing on the second of three public hearings tonight. Again, this is PDP 210009, Jerome Street Station. The comments that I made earlier regarding jurisdiction, that I do have jurisdiction to conduct the hearing, will be incorporated, as will the comments that I made regarding the procedure to comment on Zoom. I will briefly review those again prior to the public comment portion of the hearing, and also the overview of the order of proceedings is deemed incorporated into this hearing as well. So, Mr. Clark, I will turn it over to you, sir. Good to see you, and if you'd like to present just a brief overview of this project, and then we can get it turned over to the applicant team.
Hi, that's exactly right. Clark Mapes here, city planner. I will share my screen. And for the applicants, yes, this will be very brief. I know that the applicants have a pretty thorough presentation. Jerome Street Station Project Development Plan. I don't think, Mr. McCaskin, that you want to go back through these instructions for the meeting. Is that right?
Well, I wasn't going to go through the instructions, but I will quickly. I'm happy to do that since you have it here as part of the presentation. For those of you that are joining us via Zoom tonight or on the telephone, after we have heard from the city staff and the applicant, there will be an opportunity for public comment. And at that time, if you are participating via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function. If you are joining us via telephone, you want to use *9 in order to city staff will then get you in the queue for public comment as well. So thank you, Clark, for the opportunity to review that. And I can also quickly review the order of proceedings as well. So we're going to hear from Mr. Mapes with a quick overview of the project. There will then be an applicant presentation followed by a staff presentation. At that point, I will open up I will open up the public comment portion of the hearing, and then there will be an opportunity for both the applicant team and city staff to respond to questions and issues that are raised during the public comment portion of the hearing. I am required by the city's land use code to issue a written decision within 10 business days of the hearing this evening. And with that, again, Clark, thanks for having this slide prepared. I appreciate it, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Sure, thanks. Again, I'll be brief because I think the applicants might explain everything about the project, but here we are with the location. I didn't label here. I see on the left-hand side, that's North College Avenue, just north of downtown, just north of the Poudre River, between Vine Drive and the relatively new Suniga Road. Zoning, here's the property here. Again, Vine, North College, Jerome. Zoning is mostly community commercial. North College, CCN, is that zone district. The applicants purchased a property here that's really beneficial to their project and also beneficial to the city, that somebody purchased that and is now developing that. That's a whole other story. It's a piece of property behind an existing pawn shop here. So the North College strip is a kind of a commercial highway strip, and that's zone CS. Service commercial, you see the CS here, that carries down into a little bit of the western portion of the site. But what really is relevant as far as zoning is the CCN zone, which was originally written and envisions this kind of transitional development, transitional intensity, transitional density between the commercial strip and lower density subdivisions and neighborhoods beyond. And I think I will leave it at that and let the applicants present their project.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mapes, for that overview. Sam, I believe you'll be leading the applicant team discussion. So I will turn it over to Sam Coots with Ripley Design. And Sam, if you do have other members of the team that will be providing comments, we can have those individuals introduce themselves at the appropriate time, and I'll make sure I've got their names and contact information as part of the record here. And actually, before we get going, I know I did see an email that you had sent to Clark before the hearing started tonight that contained a Dropbox link where you were requesting certain documents be incorporated as part of the record of the hearing tonight. I will just note that I have received all of the documents that are listed as attachments in section 7 of the staff report. That's on page 21 of 21. But if you'd like to go through the list of documents that you sent, if there's anything in particular that you think would be important to be incorporated into the record, I'm happy to entertain that request.
Sure. I think that the attachments in the staff report were mostly there. There were a couple that I want to make sure we did get. There was a letter of intent that was included in that Dropbox link, as well as I think the architecture package. I'm not positive if the one that was on the staff report was having trouble loading on your end, but it was on my end. So I had re-uploaded the architecture package to make sure that comes through okay on your end. Other than that, I think it was just filling in the missing blanks on some applications and just making sure that we've got a full record for you of everything on the development review checklist.
Okay, I do have a document that's titled architecture _ Jerome Street Station _ PDP _ for hearing. So that has been received. What is the title of the file that contains the letter of intent?
It is just letter of intent. It's a PDF. Letter
of intent. Okay, great. I will make sure that I have that as well, and that will be part of the document package that I will review following the conclusion of the hearing tonight. So thank you for that. All right, go ahead. I'll turn it over to you, and we'll get going with the applicant presentation. Okay, thank you. Okay, can you see the screen there? Yes, thank you. Great. Again, so my name is Sam Coots with Ripley Design. I'm a land planner and landscape architect, and I'm representing the applicant's Black Timberland Company for the Jerome Street Townhomes. As Clark mentioned, here is the roughly 7-acre site. Really just wanted to highlight, as Clark did, the split in the zone districts here. We'll talk about that a little later. To kickstart, just to bring you up to speed on a little bit of history here at Old Town North. This parcel was originally conceptualized as part of the Old Town North Overall Development Plan, ODP, and highlighted here in red is Parcel B. The majority of our site lies within that Parcel B boundary, and Parcel B allows for all uses within the CCN zoning district. It doesn't place any kinds of use restrictions other than that, or density restrictions otherwise. It does plan for 1.83 acres of open space and defines a 50-foot natural buffer on the southern end of the property. Additionally, it master plans some connections here from Jerome Street, east-west connections for vehicular movement. More history on the project. You'll notice as you review the project that it started in 2020 with the same PDP number that talks about a multifamily project. Just wanted to bring this up to show where we started. So in 2020, we submitted the original PDP with 3 multifamily buildings and a small 3,000 square foot commercial space. This had one full round of review under PDP and a neighborhood meeting associated with it. It was a 4-story product and about 2 acres of open space. Through that process, we've learned a lot since then in the last couple of years. And we heard in that neighborhood meeting some concerns about density and height, along with just changing market conditions and some technical
issues that we were running into at this project. We have since pivoted and are now presenting a single family attached concept here tonight, which is before you. So this is the current site plan. There are 66 dwelling units in 12 different single family attached buildings for a total density of 9.25 DU per acre. The buildings are oriented around the perimeter of the site along Jerome Street in Suniga, and then on the southern end along Lake Canal and a major walkway spine that defines the western boundary. We'll talk about that a little more later. Each building is rear loaded through either a public or private alley and are all fronting either the major walkway spine or a road. The project proposes 3.29 acres of open space, so well above the open space that was originally envisioned in the ODP. And there are 160 parking spaces provided. Most of those come through the 2-car garages that each unit will have. There are 25 surface parking spaces scattered through the site, some here on the north end with building 1, some here between building 6 and 9, and then just north of building 10 as well. There are only 132 required, so we're well over the requirement, and that does not include on-street parking on Jerome Street here. Connectivity has been an issue really at the forefront of this design, so I wanted to take a little time on that with this slide. The 2 main points of access for the development will be off of Jerome Street. One to the north here, there's an existing stub on Jerome Street for Cahaton to be extended, as well as one on the southern end for Pascal Street. Starting with Cahaton, it's a private street stub that feeds into a private alley that will run north-south to load those rear-loaded, alley-loaded buildings. The public alley is dedicated along the southern end. This is a public dedicated right-of-way that creates as an extension of Pascal Street. And this is a public alley. It is a modified public street section, which is shown here on the left. And the purpose of this is really to be something in between an alley and a street. It's an alley in the fact that we are rear loading garages. It'll feel and act as an alley, but it acts more as a pedestrian street that also contains vehicular movement. And this is something that we've worked extensively with city staff, both engineering and planning, to come up with how do we create this meaningful connection between Jerome and College Ave that the original ODP kind of saw as important in this area. So that is the one piece of public right-of-way dedication on the site. From a pedestrian standpoint, the major thoroughfares for pedestrians are these major walkway spines you see in purple. So along the western boundary, we have buildings 2, 4, 6, and 9, all oriented along this major walkway spine, as well as buildings 10, 11, and 12 that have a major walkway spine along the southern boundary. And those do act as pedestrian streets that gain access to the units to Jerome Street or Suniga. Other than that, there's a series of connecting walks that provide that east-west movement onto Jerome Street. You see in orange here. Outside of on-street circulation, this project does complete a connection for a public trail system. There's existing public trail to the east in Old Town North, dashed in red here. And then it today dead ends into Jerome Street. We'll be continuing that along the southeastern portion of our property. And then the Powerhouse 2 recently approved this development here, connects all the way down to the new Whitewater Park here off of Vine. Really quickly wanted to touch on this. This is kind of the only really important piece of knowing the split zoning between the CCN and the CS is that this parcel, as we know, is the CS. And the only limiting factor there from a design standard standpoint is that the single family attached use is not allowed within 200 feet of the College Avenue right away. So this is that setback the 200 feet off of College, showing that we're outside of that as an allowable use. There is the natural habitat zone buffer on the southern end of the side. You'll see here in red the requirement for the natural habitat buffer zone. That is a 50-foot buffer off of the top of slope for the lake canal, as well as any natural features found. There's one grove of trees that counts towards that, which creates this bubble in the middle here. On the bottom of the screen is the green is the provided natural habitat buffer zone. That represents a 29% increase over that minimum requirement. To speak to architecture, I want to start with the main piece of architectural inspiration, which is the powerhouse directly south of this, and now the most recently approved Powerhouse 2 property. This is the existing Powerhouse 1, I guess. So notice the step back, lots of brick, gridded windows, mullions, and those iconic steam stacks there. The architecture here has taken a lot of those design cues, and the big idea also ties back some of the industrial heritage of the North College corridor. That's represented in the materials. Again, we see a very pedestrian-oriented brick base with a stucco middle, and then again carrying the brick up to this half story that is a walkout rooftop patio. So these are 2.5-story buildings. The top is just a stairwell to the patio space above. The buildings have been broken down to mimic similar proportions of other single-family attached and single-family detached homes throughout Old Town North, and creating these individualized units and helping create separation and scale to these. As I go through architecture, I'll talk about the 3 different building models we have, which are shown here, and then some building types. And the key is when I talk to building models, that's really talking about the design style. So you see here that the darker gray, the normal brick color, and then the white. These are 3 different styles and building models. Within each of those, there's a variety of 4, 5, 6, or 7 plex units that all change in shape and size of footprint, which we'll go into. Altogether, there are 8 different building types out of the 12 buildings on site, so there's a lot of variety here. As seen in this graphic, the land use code talks to not having 2 similar buildings placed next to each other on a site. This just really demonstrates how far away we are from doing that. There's a lot of variety between the 8 different building types, none of which are next to each other along a street as the code determines. There's also a requirement for variation among the buildings themselves. So this is where we get into the building models and types. And you'll see how between the 3 models, we have very distinct 3 different styles, and within those, there are further distinctions between say a 4, 5, 6, or 7 plex footprint in size and shape. Furthermore, within these building designs, you'll see different architectural details such as individualized entrances with either a gable, shed, or flat roof canopy. You'll see different architectural details such as window lintels, and just how railings are picked up. So the key here is looking at an overall coordinated theme, but still varied and different. There are 2 modifications proposed with this application. The first deals with the relationship of dwellings to streets, and that impacts 3 buildings on site. 6 and 10 are located along major walkway spines, which is allowed. However, they are further than 350 feet away from the nearest public street. And then building 9 here in the middle fronts onto a connecting walkway. However, that connecting walkway bends around a building and crosses a private alley, which is not allowed by code. So in lieu, it has been faced towards open space. It's been determined that this modification would not be a detriment to the public good. The main finding here is that the intent of this standard is to create a strong pedestrian framework and not have any sacrifice in connectivity, which I think was apparent through our connectivity diagram earlier. Furthermore, it doesn't create any unsafe condition for residents or the public, and there are no other codes that are or standards that are violated by this modification. In order to prove the modification, we've determined that this application promotes the intent and the purpose of the standard equally well or better than a plan that which complies. And the purpose of this standard specifically is to promote variety, visual interest, and pedestrian-oriented streets in residential development. This is an example of that major walkway spine on the western side, and showing the level of detail of which these are designed to. It still meets all the definitions of a major walkway spine in width and character, clear sight lines and tree-lined walk. Then it goes above and beyond and introduces articulated shrub beds, fencing, pedestrian level details such as walls and benches, nice handrails, and then enhanced paving to really up that visual interest through these corridors. As seen here, this is a quick sketch showing what that would feel like walking through that pedestrian spine, that major walkway spine. So you'll see the articulated path, different paving styles, detailed handrails, walls, all of that. This is something that promotes that visual interest equally well or better than a standard that complies. The second modification reflects the street-facing facade standard. This standard says that every building shall have at least one doorway or entry facing an adjacent street that is smaller than a full arterial. So there are 2 units on this plan where this does not comply, and that's building 1 and 12 on the east side facing Jerome Street. This has also been determined not to be a detriment to the public good. The key thing here is that the side elevations have a lot of extra articulation and fenestration, and the level of the visual interest of these side elevations, not something that is a detriment to the public. As well as this is exactly what the code does not want, is a blank wall, no windows, no doorways, maybe some meter banks. This is the antithesis of what the code is after. Ironically, if you put a doorway onto this facade, then it could meet code. In lieu, we've presented these 2 as our side elevations for those building 1 and 12, which you see a lot of extra windows, articulations in roof and massing, even downspouts have been used to create a rhythm across those facades. This absolutely promotes that variety and visual interest purpose of the code equally well or better than one that complies. Furthermore, if that one doesn't meet the criteria, we do find that it's nominal and inconsequential to the overall plan, being it's only 2 of the 66 units. So I think for now, I will stay there. We have lots of backup exhibits and graphics and our whole team here to answer any questions you might have.
Great, Sam. I appreciate that. The amount of visual detail that you had in the presentation was very helpful with the graphics in terms of understanding the 2 modifications of standard that are requested as part of the application. At this point, let's move over to the staff's application. And Clark, if you'd like to pull up your PowerPoint presentation, I'll turn it over to you, and then I'll hold any questions until after the conclusion of staff's presentation, or perhaps until after the conclusion of public comment.
Thanks. As I thought, the applicant's presentation really covered the main issues very, very well. I included a little bit more background on how the Old Town North area even came to be, starting back in 1995, the first ever North College Corridor Plan. The site that we're talking about is generally here. There was no Jerome Street. There was no Suniga Road. This was in what turned out to sort of be Pascal. So anyway, just a lot of background, but I will say that this plan envisioned this area developing in a sort of a downtown related, lower downtown, semi-industrial, contemporary semi-industrial, mixed neighborhood, transitional again between the commercial strip and more just residential neighborhoods away from it. 1995 there, and then skipping to 2002 with Old Town North, the original vision and development concept for this property, which was floodplain. The developer had to fill this property, and developer installed this street and block pattern, this infrastructure, all the utilities, finished that work up in about 2007. And if you think about that, that's a whole other story. The recession started in 2008. That's a whole other story. That's got nothing to do with this. There was an overall development plan done that followed the sort of illustrative plan. There was a 2006 update of the North College Corridor Plan update. Again, shows the site is down here, this yellow asterisk. And again, you can see the idea of additional street connectivity, and it's reinforced the sort of recommended preferred theme and design approach as a contemporary semi-industrial kind of a style for buildings, more connectivity. That's the plan. Just briefly, the staff report explains how all of the general development standards for this project, that's Article 3 of the Land Use Code, applies to all development citywide. All these conventional topics that almost every plan has, these were all met pretty easily and pretty early on, subject to technical adjustments through multiple iterations. So there's not much to even present on the bulk of the site planning issues. The modification for the relationship of dwellings to streets, staff also, finds that would not be detrimental to the public good and is equal to or better than, and also there's an undue physical hardship. These are the buildings that you just saw in the applicant's presentation. And the reason for staff's findings are that, first of all, part of the intent of that is for neighborhood streets to have the faces of buildings along them and not parking lots and not blank walls. And so this plan very well covers that. It calls for a framework of space that buildings fit into. And in this case, that includes Pascal and Cahaton extensions, but just the basic idea that there are tendencies sometimes for a development to have a building product that they want to place them on a site. There is something in the industry that gets sort of talked about. It's the sort of train wreck where a bunch of buildings are placed onto a piece of property to sort of maximize, and then go back later and in between there, try to fit streets and or walkways and of course parking lots. But as opposed to establishing a clear, legible framework of public space. Sam mentioned this. The physical hardship aspect of it. The strip along Jerome, the property along Jerome is narrow. And also the southern part, by the time the Lake Canal, by the way, is the southern boundary of this site. It's the riparian forest, large mature trees, and has a natural habitat buffer zone. By the time the buffer zone is protected, the east-west area of property along the south part is very narrow and has to do with whether it would have been possible to interject more streets for buildings to face onto. So that's part of the physical hardship finding that staff made. Extending Pascal and Cahaton per se as streets is sort of hindered, if not precluded, by existing development on the west. That's again, a whole other story that dates back to the original North College Corridor Plan, which at that time, there was some expectation that North College, the strip along North College might start to be assembled and significantly redeveloped. But a lot of those buildings have gained new life, reinvestment, and don't seem to be going away anytime soon. So anyway, that has to do with not extending streets per se into and through the property. Oh, and then the only way, the staff report explains that the only way for buildings 9 and 10 to comply with the standard, the letter of the law, so to speak, in terms of setting them along streets, would be to eliminate the buildings. There was no other way, and so that would be an undue hardship. Staff explains in the staff report. One way to think about it is to think about what kind of a plan could possibly meet the standard for all the dwellings to directly face a street or be sideways to a street. And another early iteration that was, just looked at for this property showed buildings along Jerome with parking behind and parking lots behind. And then Pascal extended as more of a street with buildings side loaded onto Pascal Street here and then facing Pascal here. Even this wouldn't meet all of the standards because this building here would have needed to have its garages facing Pascal. And if Pascal was considered a street per se, then there's a garage door, a limitation for streets. So anyway, there have been multiple iterations over a couple of years looked at, but that's to understand what it would take. And instead of doing one row of buildings along Jerome, the current plan proposes 2 rows of buildings, some of which have to face west, given the internal alley with garages. And so that's that major walkway spine that really does form a framework all the way up and down the west here. And then within this relatively equally narrow area available for development here, Pascal was a very specially tailored, carefully wrought solution, unique, one-of-a-kind situation to get some kind of connection through there. That was more detail on Pascal and Cahaton. You've seen this. That's the modification for the street-facing facades. It looks like that's it. Staff's recommendation is approval of the 2 modifications of standards for the kind of the orientation to a street sidewalk connecting walkway. That's 352D1. And then the facade standard for the ends of buildings, the sides of buildings, is D2, and staff recommends approval. And all right, I'll stop sharing and see if if there are any questions.
All right, thank you, Cleric. I appreciate that. Let's move into the public comment portion of the hearing. I'm just curious to know if we have folks from the neighborhood that are with us here tonight to ask questions or provide any comment on this project. Katie, I'll look to you to help with that. Or do we have any members of the public that have their hands raised at this point? And again, for those of you that are participating via Zoom, there's a raise hand function at the bottom of the screen. And for those of you that may be calling in, *9 is what you would like to do to identify yourself to city staff.
I am not seeing any hands raised at this time.
Okay, so I'll just let the record reflect.
I
that-
do have one hand that just popped up.
Great, thank you, Katie. So I'm
Sure.
going to open the public comment portion of the hearing at 7:47 p.m.
This first speaker is, I apologize if I mispronounce your name, Rianne. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, it's Ryan Camp McCormick. Hi, we're at 802 Jerome. We're just across from the proposed development. I just have two questions. One being about the, you talked a bit about the extension of the trail going down towards the river. We're wondering if that means that we're going to get a pedestrian crossing at Jerome and Vine. And then the second question was regarding the floodplain. We're in kind of a serious situation here with the floodplain next to the Whitewater Park. Wondering if this development makes any kind of changes to that for us. That is
Okay.
it.
Yeah, Ryan, thank you for those questions. Before we provide the applicant or city staff to help answer those, I just want to make sure that we don't have any other members of the public that would like to ask questions or have comments at this point. So, Katie, do we have anybody else that is in the queue?
I am not seeing any additional hands raised.
Okay. I will go ahead and close the public comment portion of the hearing at 7:49 p.m. And Sam, maybe I'll turn it back over to you at this point, to you and the applicant team, if you'd like to address the questions that Ryan Kent McCormick just raised.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. I think we'll have Andy Reese, our civil engineer at Northern Engineering, jump on for those two questions.
Great, thank you, Sam.
Good evening. As Sam mentioned, my name is Andy Reese with Northern Engineering. Regarding the Jerome and Vine crossing, that's not a part of this project. However, it is being included as a part of the Powerhouse 2 project. That's where you're going to see those improvements happening. We're currently working with the city to kind of figure out the exact configuration, but that is on the docket as a part of that other project. Regarding the question about the floodplain, the work that's happening right now is fully taking into account the floodplain, and we're complying with the city requirements to show no rise as a part of our project. So that essentially, says that the improvements we're doing are not going to adversely affect any upstream or downstream properties. That being said, there's not anything in our plans or in the current modeling that would change the floodplain limits or improve the floodplain limits. Those will continue to kind of be where they are today. So not any worse, but also not any better as a result of this project.
Thank you, Andy. Clark, do you have anything you'd like to add there?
I would like to see if Steve Gilchrist, our traffic engineer, has anything to add about the Vine crossing that was also very carefully wrought in the Powerhouse 2 project. Or Steve, did Andy cover it just completely?
He pretty much covered it. We are working right now on design. We're working with Powerhouse 2 and the city's active modes plan to initiate that crossing and determine the exact funding and those things. So it's one that it's in progress. It is coming hopefully in the near future, and we'll get some type of enhanced crossing there. It sounds more like an RFB type system that will have a pedestrian actuated signal that will hopefully get folks across there safely to the Whitewater Park.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any specific, I will definitely review the staff report in detail as I'm taking everything into consideration here, but are there any off-site traffic improvements that are being required as part of this infill development?
Not that I'm aware of. It's more adjacent frontages. One of the things that the Powerhouse 2 with that trail extension, they are providing a widened path across their thing, but it wasn't required of the Jerome Street Station project. So the other thing is that connection to College Avenue. That's one that we're looking internally within the city to provide some type of connectivity out to College. So that's really that pedestrian piece that allows that connectivity to that retail and those services along College Avenue.
You're talking about Pascal. Yeah, okay, so moving west from the property boundary
Yeah.
toward college, okay. And that would require some acquisition of property interest then, right?
I can't remember if it's an actual existing easement or not. Tim might be able to speak to that, but yeah, it's one that we wanted them to definitely connect into that. And then also even in the future, there was actually supposed to be two connections to college, one further to the north, and I think we're looking to provide at least a pedestrian connection further to the north as well, if any of those properties on that west side develop. But I think with Pascal, we had that access in that alley existing.
Mm.
That's where we went with that connection to start with.
I can provide a little more background if you'd like on that. Just with the connection to Pascal at North College Avenue, this project is not acquiring any right of way or property over there. They have a letter of intent from the property owner, and they, excuse me, that property owner will improve that driveway access to be usable, essentially.
Okay, thank you, Tim. And then at some point, though, you're saying there would be potentially north of Pascal, but south of Suniga, there'd be at some point looking at potentially doing another pedestrian access that would move west out toward college. That's in kind of a longer term goal.
Yes, it was discussed that Caheaton Street would possibly make that connection eventually, but that's not really established as of right now. It's a future consideration.
Okay, and then for the entire circulation plan that's proposed in this PDP, I'm assuming that this has been reviewed and signed off on by Poudre Fire Authority at this point.
Poudre Fire Authority was included in all stages of the review, and they've approved it enough to get to this point at least.
There is something else I would say about Caheaton, if I can.
Go ahead, Clark. Yep.
I skipped over this. I had this slide in there. But Caheaton Street in Old Town North is here. It currently comes to Jerome. And then actually the west side of Jerome was built with curb returns where Caheaton was to be extended. Again, staff and the applicants looked thoroughly at all possibilities for how this could possibly continue over to college as a street. It actually would require removal of the development to the west on one or two properties, would sort of take property away from those properties, which would make redevelopment even more unlikely, if you follow that. So anyway, just through all the iterations, it ends up with this space, which is the equivalent of extending Caheaton Street as a public space, and the sidewalks on Caheaton continue across straight as if there was a street here in the middle, but instead it's just open space, and there will be an access easement stubbed to the property line, which is what Steve referred to, that in the future, if anything happens over here that triggers development, they'll be required to extend those public access easements. I thought that took some iterations to get to that point. And then as far as the Pascal situation, anyway, there's an existing alley. I'll stop sharing on the, it actually runs along the north edge of a pawn shop that's there, but it's an existing access easement. So this property will extend a public right of way or sort of an alley-like feature that will tie into that access easement. Someday maybe it'll become right of way, but that's already there.
Okay, thank you, Clark. And just to confirm, staff is recommending approval of this project and recommendation of approval of the two modifications of standard, correct? Both the relationship to streets and the street facing facades, right? Staff is
Right.
satisfied that those are. Okay,
And the facade modification is pretty simple to get your head around. The staff report has a couple of pages on the public space framework in lieu of a street and block network that you can read at your leisure in detail, but it's all been pretty well presented here tonight. But
Okay.
yes, recommending approval, yes, with no conditions or anything.
great. And I'm not sure, I did send a request to I'm not sure I have a copy of Sam, the applicant's PowerPoint yet. But you know, granted, I did not have a chance to check all of my emails this afternoon. So if that's already been sent, then please ignore that request. But if it's possible to get a like a PDF version of that report for my file and to have the opportunity to review that in a little bit more detail, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'll get it
okay.
sent over.
I appreciate that. So I don't have further questions at this point. I'd like to thank Sam, Ripley Design and the rest of the team that's on the hearing tonight, representing Black Timber Land Company. Appreciate it. Clark, thank you very much for your work on the staff report and also for some of that historical overview. Regarding this North College area, that's just some good background information for me to have. I appreciate that. And then finally, thank you also to Ryan Ken McCormick for taking time out of your Wednesday evening to be with us tonight. So again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the hearing, I am required to provide a written findings and a decision within 10 business days of the conclusion of the hearing. So that will be distributed in accordance with the land use code requirements. So I will close the public hearing on this.
Sir,
project
Marcus, excuse me. I'm sorry. I just said staff recommends approval with no conditions. When you read the staff report, you will see that I threw in late in the process, I added in the recommendation that there's one condition of approval. I wasn't sure that this even needs to be a condition because it typically happens anyway, and we would have insisted on this in final plan. But where I just showed you the Cahaton Street extension and those two sidewalks, and I said that a public access easement will be stubbed to the property lines on the west side. If we could just have the applicants agree right now that there's no problem doing that on the plat, in the final plat, to just dedicate a public access easement that extends to the property line. It's something we did. In fact, Ripley Design did this at Local, which was called Scott Plaza on Westwood. It's the same kind of thing. No issue, I don't think. Sam, is there any?
Nope. Yeah, Clark, I think we had discussed that offline and we're all okay with that. So we'll make sure it gets on the plat in the final.
Issue, no problem. So to Marcus, I would say, never mind the recommendation of a condition of approval for that. That was one of the last days that before I sent this to you, and there's no need to officially do any condition. It's just going to happen. So thank you.
Okay, I am seeing that now on page 21 of the report.
And if I can say here in the hearing on the record, never mind. It's going to happen, but we don't need a condition in your decision.
Okay, let me just make a quick note of that. Thank you, Clark. I appreciate that. So I will, again, I'll have the written decision issued within 10 business days of tonight's hearing. Thank you all for participating. I'll close the public hearing at 8:02 p.m.